This is the Bat Flip Podcast. Now here's your host, Damien, David, and Matt. Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of the Bat Flip Podcast. Damien, Matt, David here as always. And today we are joined by a special guest, Greg Zumach. As always, we have him on around this time, around the MLB Draft, College World Series, to kind of go over everything. College World Series, prospects, everything with the MLB Draft.
I got you. We're talking O-line, we're talking tight ends. And...
Yeah. Which two-way players do we have that can play football here?
I'm talking draft. 12-man or 12th personnel and everything. Yeah, we're just, I don't know. I'll just toss out as many football terms as I've got.
Listen, I am too much on the this weekend had the College 25 beta for the football game. I saw way too much about that, so I'm just locked in on, like, we're a month away from that. I'm so excited, but anyways, Greg, thanks for joining us again, and how you been over the last year?
Hey, I've been pretty good. This is a really fun time to be diving into the amateur side of the game, right? Like, all eyes are going to be on amateur baseball, and probably no other place throughout the year is other than the College World Series, really the NCAA tournament. And it all leads to kind of my neck of the woods in Omaha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds great. You guys, you got anything?
Are you going to be in Omaha this year, Greg?
I live in Omaha, so yeah.
I mean, in the stadium for the college.
Oh yeah, I'll be there a handful of times. I and my dad tried to get tickets in like April when they came out, and holy cow, I was like on the phone with him. I was like, "We're getting snaked. Like, I don't know what's going on here," and we just got absolutely hosed. So I waited out a couple, and I had a couple friends, and I'll go to a handful of games. It's just nice. It's just very, very competitive to get tickets. Yeah. Without paying like a crazy amount.
Right. All right. So speaking of that, let's start with a little bit of the College World Series. So you're going to go to a handful of games. What is a game, or so far through the bracket, we have Louisville versus Oregon State, Arizona versus Coastal Carolina, LSU versus Arkansas, and then UCLA. I don't know if it's went final, but I know it was Duke versus Murray State. I don't know what the score is of that one. But what are you looking forward to games-wise so far out of the matchups we have set?
Of the matchups, I dig Oregon State. I think, and part of that is just a little bit of a bias. So I taught at Oregon State for 6 years, and that doesn't mean like I'm a diehard Oregon State fan, but it's both my kids were born down the road. They have Beavers gear. While I don't really have like a huge rooting interest or anything, I know it's like extremely special. That they made it to Omaha. This is the first time that they've made it to Omaha since either of my kids were born. Last time was 2018 when they won. And so, that's honestly a pretty special one. If we're talking true baseball performances, though, honestly, Oregon State's got it. Louisville and Oregon State is fantastic. Is that final, by the way? I should probably know this, but I haven't caught up on if the games are officially laid out that way. Is that what it's sounding like?
I think everything... Yeah.
When I looked at the bracket earlier, that's what it had it marked out as. So that's why I put it down. So hopefully, as long as NCAA is not lying to me directly on their website, that we should be good with that. But
I think they have the matchups set before they don't reseed it. Like, they just have it set from the original bracket. And also, just for the record, Murray and Duke are both tied 3-3 in the 7th inning as we're recording right now. So that could go either way.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I'm seeing Coastal Carolina against Arizona in game 1, Oregon State and Louisville. I think that's part of why I was asking, because Oregon State and Louisville sound like they would certainly get the premier matchup. But, I mean, those are two teams that absolutely have big-time prospects to be watching. And in many ways, I'm there for the players. I'm there for the experience, but I'm definitely there for the players. And so you look at Oregon State, where a lot of their premier guys are 2026 eligible. Dax Whitney and Ethan Kleinschmidt, who's their Sunday starter, are both 2026 guys. They're not 2025 guys. And so a lot can happen. And so, I try to dig in a little bit to the future year performers. I think that's really helpful. Like, I saw Jack Caglione in person in Omaha. That's really helpful. I've seen Dax Whitney once already locally, and then I'm hoping to see him again when he's in Omaha. And that's informative, but really I'm diving into the 2025 guys. And one of the big time pitchers to be watching out for on the Louisville squad is Patrick Forbes. A guy that if he really goes off and Louisville, plays several games and he gets a couple chances to pitch, he honestly could pitch his way into the first round. He has that kind of caliber of arm. And so definitely somebody that to be watching for. As far as some of these other kind of matchups, Coastal Carolina is, as of now, a team that has a bit of a Cinderella type to it, right? Like it's not a Cinderella. They were a very good team this year, but in many ways, they're not the SEC squad. They're not the Big Ten, the ACC, matchup. And to see what they're doing is exceedingly fun. How they've gotten to this point. I don't know if Tommy LaStella and Jake Arrieta are going to have the same kind of bet they had. I think. I don't think Jake Arrieta wants to get another tattoo on his butt, which happened because Tommy LaStella's Coastal Carolina team won the College World Series. But that being said, it is definitely it's just a fun squad to watch. So LSU and Arkansas, big time matchups. I could go into some of them, but at the end of the day, it's just getting these 8 teams there, and then just anything can happen.
Yeah. I've been personally victimized by Coastal Carolina too much this weekend. So as an Auburn Tiger, that was not not great.
Pretty brutal. I have some friends that are that collaborate with Auburn and work with Auburn, and I personally was a little victimized by it because we were going to meet up. So I was like, oh no, if you make it to Omaha, we're definitely going to meet up, and no dice.
So looking at the Duke and Murray State game as it's still going right now, which one of those two do you think presents a better matchup for UCLA? And personally, I want to shout out Murray State because our buddy Adam, his cousin, pitched at Murray State for a few years. So we watched a lot of them over the last couple of years. Yep. And let's just say I am shocked so far that they are at this point after watching them for the last couple of years. But who do you think would between Duke and Murray State offer a better matchup there with UCLA? Oh, well, something just happened.
Yeah, Murray State just homered. It's 4-3.
Whoa, wow.
Let's go.
So my answer is going to be Murray State. No, I don't know. Those two clubs are, I don't know. With them playing on a Monday, sometimes that can affect pitching matchups in the following week too. Because if you're thinking about it, they're set for. Let me pull up that bracket here. They would be set for. Well, they at least get the Saturday, so they've got a little bit extra of a time. Yeah. But I don't know, because when I've seen some of these Cinderella squads, though, I will say that those games are tight and tough. And they're resilient too. Like all these squads are resilient. They all had to make it through this part, but I don't know if I have one that really screams out an advantage, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. You guys got anything College World Series based?
Who's your pick then? Would be my next follow up, right? Of these 8 teams, who do you think gets through? Because I've looked at these a little bit of late. I think my favorite team is probably Arkansas.
Yeah,
but because of the pitching staff, their pitching is so awesome. Good. So
yeah, the hitting is awfully impressive as well. So if I had to pick, I'll pick from one on each side, and I'll just say it's an Oregon State versus Arkansas matchup.
Oh boy,
in the finals, and then that point, gosh, I don't know, but
if you see a pop up, you better watch out.
yeah. Oh man, yeah, those have been quite intense. So,
all right. Well, Matt, do you have anything else?
Not especially, just an opinion, and this might just be because I watched them this weekend, but I think Coastal Carolina's got about as good a pitching as anybody. I mean, their pitching is incredible. Every time they run out something for the bullpen, they were throwing 96 from the left side or something crazy. So, I thought that was impressive to me.
Well, and Bodine makes excellent contact.
Yeah, he's great.
And probably his biggest thing right now is just not a ton of juice, but it's really hard to hit home runs already in Charles Schwab Field in Omaha. And so a lot of times you just need the guy that's going to get the ball the other way, hit a double or something like that. And Bodine does that. And especially with your catcher kind of being so experienced and that kind of calming presence back there, I think that's a big intangible factor. So yeah, Coastal Carolina is absolutely a qualified team, and they certainly have the juice to do it. So they are a tough matchup.
Sweet. So let's go to talking more about the draft. I think that's where a lot more of our wheelhouses and stuff are. So first and foremost, let's kind of just start at what's the feeling around this draft class in general, and what do you think we can kind of start to expect from them? Like, some drafts are really prep heavy, some are more college guys. Like, what do you expect from this one so far?
Yeah, it's not a fantastic draft. I would love to be able to say, like, this is an amazing class. Like, we're so excited. Like, all these picks are going to be amazing. It's not a strong class. And that doesn't mean it's insanely weak. And it doesn't mean that you aren't going to get excellent performers and all-stars or even people outside the first round. What we think about when we say the draft isn't a very strong one, it's not very consensusly strong. So for that, for instance, like we look at, 2023 is kind of an aberration because it was a bunch of factors all smushing in together with like the last COVID season, affecting a lot of preps and stuff like that. But 2023, you knew your top 5 were amazing. And then, like, across the board, like, everyone had pretty similar top 5. Like, those are just stacked. And after that, your top 6 to 15 were really good. And, like, everyone felt they're really good. And, yeah, maybe, like, there were some quibbles about, like, Matt Shaw probably should have gone in the top 10. I mean, I think people even said that at the time. But at the end of the day, you're still talking about like a really solid group of players. Here, there's a lot more question marks.
Yeah.
And the teams at the top, like Ethan Holiday is being talked about in this class in general as this like, well, he's obviously the best player in the class. And I would say if you compare that to most classes, people wouldn't really say that. That's not saying that Ethan Holiday isn't a darn good prospect. He's the brother of Jackson Holiday and the son of Matt Holiday. So he comes from an incredible baseball family, and he's certainly very qualified to be a top 10 player, but he's not what Jackson Holiday was at the time. He's not Paul Skeens. He's not, Wyatt Langford. He's not Max Clark and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, like that's kind of the challenge the teams are taking right now and figuring out, okay, so in many ways, it's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What kind of qualities does this prospect have? And then what are we as an organization good at developing? So for instance, like Ethan Holiday, one of his issues, he's probably not making as much contact as he should. Well, some clubs are going to be much better about addressing that or really playing into that strength. And others aren't going to do as much development to it. So if these players line up fairly well with teams that do things pretty well for them, then they're in an excellent chance. But with draft classes like this, sometimes we see in these weak classes, guys that go in the 25 to 35 range where they end up, or 40 range, where they end up falling to like the Dodgers. They end up falling to the Guardians. Well, those clubs develop players really well, and they look like they should have gone much higher. But had they ended up in another club, maybe they don't look as hot. That's just kind of my thoughts there.
Yeah. So kind of speaking into what we're talking about with draft classes, obviously a big thing around the draft is bonus pools. And you draft not necessarily for need, you draft for what you can sign later on, right?
Yep.
I think one thing that we've seen over the last couple of years, especially, is NIL has really changed the way that drafts happen. We got a new ruling this last weekend, basically, about the way that NIL is changing moving forward, and it's not going to be directly based there. It's more schools paying directly the player rather than foregoing it around. Sometimes it affects round one, but how do you think it's going to affect the depth of the draft, say that, the round 2 to round 7-ish, where you kind of do find the values and peaks and valleys from there?
So I definitely want to say it can affect round 1, especially those prep players. I mean, Dax Whitney, we were just talking about him at Oregon State. I don't want to toss out what I think he was offered, but the guy turned down very likely first round money. And yes, I would love to say like Oregon State Corvallis is an amazing place to be, but it's probably not just because the summers in Oregon. So, it can affect the first round. And, but to get to your point, it's where it gets really, really, really challenging are these guys that are rounds 2 through 10, even where, gosh, I mean, between the transfer, first of all, I'm for anything that's good for the players. I really am. I'm good for anything that's good for the players. These players put out a product that I certainly enjoy, and I'm happy that they are rewarded for that. I'll just put that out there. So I'm not going to rag on NIL, and I'm not saying you are either. Yeah. But between like the transfer rules and the NIL, now it's kind of changed the dynamic here, because you used to have players where you would say, well, they don't really have a lot of leverage. Maybe they're coming up on their eligibility. They're getting kind of older. They're playing at a smaller school. They're probably just somebody where it's like, look, if you get an offer in the 5th round for slot, you should probably take it, or even below that. Like, you're not going to get better. And now they're able to say, yeah, I've got like an outstanding offer to go to LSU. Like, I think I'm just going to take that money and take my chances next year. And so it's the feedback that I've gotten is that teams have had to do so much more homework. And frankly, look, these are multi-billion-dollar organizations. They can do that, right? Like that's they need to be doing the effort on that. Like, this is still good for players, but like they've had to do so much more homework. I was talking with a scout recently. I'm not going to mention who the player was, but we were talking about a guy who might end up playing even multi-sport. And we were kind of talking back and forth about, like, what's this guy's chances about playing football in the future, right? And so we're kind of like talking back and forth on that, and I'm just like, boy, I'm not it. Now, we were joking about the NFL draft stuff, but I was like, I'm not an NFL draft guy, but like, here's what I would think here. And we're just kind of talking back and forth. It's not like an organization's making this decision, but there's so much that goes into that, because especially with NIL, then you're talking about like football and baseball money, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and football is the big money one. The Cubs have Cade Horton now. Yep. But had Cade Horton not gone like 7th, effectively, had he not gotten the top 10 and paid like a top 10 player in that draft class, my man was almost definitely coming back to Oklahoma. Probably wasn't playing football, but he was going to do just fine. So like the NIL is this, it's got this heightened effect really throughout the entire draft, and teams have just had to do more homework.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, and you throw on top of it kind of the fact that a lot of these guys who are looking at being like top 20, top first round picks are guys who 2 years ago in their situation right now we're talking about where they're 2nd to 5th, 6th rounders, and they decided to go to school, take the NIL, and then now they're top 10, top 20 picks. Guys like, Cade Anderson and Ike Irish and I was another Mason Neville, like some of these guys that were pretty famously good prospects a few years ago now are, in that top first round. So they increased their money now and with their draft money, and they made money in college the last 2 years that they wouldn't be making in the minors.
Yeah. And I'm not going to mention too many specific players that I think maybe made the wrong decision on that, but there are some. And there are definitely players that have turned down, gosh, I mean, probably $3+ million in the draft, been in good situations that it just felt like, you know what, I'm going to go to LSU. I'm going to go to these schools. And you kind of look a couple years later and it hasn't worked out. So every player's got to make their own decision. But like you mentioned, Matt, like it can work out exceedingly well, right? Like you can be rewarded for your time in college. Sometimes you play at Rock Shalowski said that he's come out and said that he's turned down first round money in the draft because he wanted to play in Omaha. Well, mission accomplished. He's playing in Omaha and he's likely to do very, very well for himself next year. So it definitely can work, but it is I wouldn't want to be the one making that decision. I guess that's how I'll say.
I get that.
And as far as you were talking about teams have to do the work, with the condensed draft schedule now too, where you have to have round 20s through day 2. How does that affect what teams do? You know, there's been some stuff where people are like, hey, we had some time to kind of think things over a little bit more, have some more conversations. It's not really going to be an option anymore. So how does that also affect the with this money pool and how people or how teams really use that?
Yeah, I was talking with one scouting director who said I absolutely love it. And then, you know, I think others have some mixed feelings because, like you said, it's going to require teams to do a ton of homework in advance to try to get this. It's not an easy thing. You know, what it does change a little bit as well is that it also kind of it may prevent some players from really changing their ask or lowering their ask. And so this can have some effects that are even a little bit negative for the players where, you know, historically we had the 3 days of the draft. Well, you finished day 2, you still haven't had any bites on the line, so to speak. You know, you've said your ask is $600K, and then you get to day 3 and, you know, a scouting director calls your advisor and says, look, hey, let's be reasonable. What if we can talk about, you know, 400K, 500K? Like, are you going to give up your dream, you know, over that amount of money? And it presents a different challenge. So in addition, there's some homework, but there's also the fact that, frankly, a lot can change. And so with this condensed thing, it's going to be rapid fire. I mean, going 4 through 20 is pretty intense. Like that's a big day for everyone. So I think that organizations are going to like, and a lot of scouts are going to like just being done a day early, but it means day 2 is pretty crazy.
Yeah. So if I want to, I guess my first question would be, you know, like my mom like listens to the show, right? So if she wants to, what could you elaborate on what you mean by homework that a scout would need to do? I'm thinking, of course, like you have to call the family, you have to get the number that they're willing to sign. They have to, you know, you have to do that multiple picks in advance on this day 2 of the draft where you're doing rounds 4 through 20, 30 picks per round, right? So like all those players, like for anybody not just like immediately up to date on the draft, when a team has to do homework, you're talking calling, getting those relationships, you're talking extra scouting, right?
Oh,
or do you have your like list, your big board of players, and you're just like, I know who we're going to get, but we have to figure out which of our, you know, 3 favorite players are going to sign for this money? Is that what's the way there?
It's all of that. So for instance, I'll use an example where well, without going into too many specifics, but you know, you can have a situation where there's like a high school player that you really, really click with their family. You spend a lot of time getting to know them. You have to kind of navigate these waters knowing that you may not get the most accurate answers. And it's really part of that homework is figuring out, okay, they're telling me all the right things. Like the family's like, yeah, we really want this. We really want this. What is the truth? Now they've got to do the best thing for their, you know, the advisor and the family. They need to do the best thing for the player. That's ultimately their responsibility. But you still have to kind of suss out what's legit. And the same thing for players and advisors to you too, right? Like I've heard a bunch of situations, and this is not ragging on scouts at all. They do amazing work, but there's times where I will hear, like on the player side, where I got a message from somebody saying, I really thought this team would draft me. You know, I was hearing all season, like this scout loved me. They were at every game. They told me the 3 days before the draft, like, we've got you here or here. And I never got that call. And like it goes both ways. Like the homework is really, really detailed, but you're likely in people's homes. You're getting to know them. You're getting to know their family. You're getting to know what they're interested in. This is going to sound overly simplistic. You want to know if they really love baseball. Yeah. And like a lot of these kids are amazing athletes, and they probably like baseball. There's very few instances in Major League Baseball where people don't like baseball. I'm not sure Anthony Rendon actually likes baseball, but outside of him, like I think everybody likes baseball. And, you know, you're trying to figure out, though, in a game of failure where somebody is going from being almost definitely the best player on their team, maybe not if they're playing at like LSU or anything, but likely the best player on their team, best player in their neighborhood, maybe the best player in their school's history. Now you're going to go to a league where you're facing all of that. Everyone is the best player. You're going to fail. The best players are going to fail. Jackson Holliday was an amazing prospect. He failed at the major league level. And so how do you respond to that? You got to love the game. And that's part of the homework. You're digging in to try to figure out, okay, like, hey, what do you do when stuff doesn't go your way? And there is a good adage in scouting that I was told by a director that just is, look, getting a report on somebody's best day is fun. I honestly want to see what happens on a mediocre or bad day. Like, what do they do? I had a player recently that I was watching where just like the catcher wasn't catching the ball. I mean, these are high school kids, right? You're throwing like 92 with sweep, which is awesome. It was 92, and then 83 was sweep, and like your catcher just wasn't catching it, and player would get aggravated and stuff. How are you going to respond, right? Like, and it's that kind of homework and digging into a guy. Basically, you don't want to just be seeing somebody once or twice.
Beautiful.
So talking about the homework to it, right? We talked about all the behind the scenes about, hey, does this player love baseball? Getting the information on that. Now, one of the things big time we talked about, mentioned the NFL draft earlier. Their combine means a lot. A lot of that stuff, they relate it to on-field performance, basically. How does the MLB combine? How do teams value what they see there, and how? Because it's not really a direct correlation of what you can take to, like the NFL. You could say, hey, this guy is slow. He's not going to be able to run someone down. Like, how do they really use that information during the MLB draft, since it is going to be years down the road?
I think let's expand it a little bit, because what you're looking at in the combine is two things. You're looking at basically biomechanical type of analysis. You're not even doing too much of that. But we'll say the physical stuff. And so that's a combination of like exit velocity, workout, and then you can also add in what teams do, which is biomechanical analysis. We'll get back to that. And then you also have the mental stuff. And I will say that they do some of that same thing from like the NFL draft combine, where they're asking a lot of questions. They're really trying to dig in. You're doing the medicals too.
Yeah.
And that stuff all kind of goes into a bucket that can rule in a guy or it can bump up somebody. Noble Meyer was, I can say publicly, this came out a couple times. He like absolutely nailed his mental questions and his interactions with teams, and he probably made himself a lot of money. He was already going to make a lot of money, but this is a prep right-hander, and that's a demographic that just doesn't really do too hot at the top of the draft. He made himself a lot of money, and that stuff is all really important. And obviously the medicals can rule in a guy, or it can take somebody completely off the board.
Or it can get the Dodgers to draft them.
Yeah, or the Twins. The Twins are a team.
The Twins are
that numerous times have taken players high that have been just straight medical red flagged. It was do not draft in the first round. Really, really impressive players that have, in their defense, are currently on their major league roster. So it can work out pretty well. But at the end of the day, like all that medical stuff, the between the ears, that's one bucket. Then it's the physical stuff. I would say that from my understanding, a lot of what the physical stuff that you see when you're watching the MLB draft combine, things like exit velocity, things like the workouts, probably more for show than anything else. Seeing, there are exceptions, like a guy like Ronnie Cruz is a 3rd round pick of the Cubs last year. He had a really impressive MLB draft combine performance. My understanding is the Cubs were already way in on him. Where things get interesting, though, and this is where I think things do matter and correlate more to the NFL draft combine, is that teams do individual workouts. And they do biomechanical analyses. Almost all of them do biomechanical analyses. And they do their own thing where they're measuring all the data. And they're doing it with their own proprietary stuff, and they're watching it. They're doing force plates. They're figuring out like hip turns and launch angles, stuff like that. And wrist size and just all of these biomechanical studies to figure out how tight a guy is or whatever. They're getting pitch data on him, Edgertronic data. It is insane, the type of databases these form. That stuff is more correlated, at least from my understanding, and every team's going to feel a little differently on their own secret sauce. That stuff is correlated. So like how the NFL draft is isn't it like the 10-yard shuttle is the secret sauce when we evaluate like interior offensive linemen? See, I said I wasn't really into the NFL draft, but I'm pretty sure like the 10-yard is like highly correlated to success for interior offensive linemen or just offensive linemen. And like that correlation is really important with the MLB draft, the proprietary stuff that they have. That's the stuff that's correlated.
And that's, of course, stuff we don't have access to, can't see.
Right.
So,
nope.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that works out.
Yeah, right. Though. We'll just say yet. We don't have it yet.
Right.
I do want to, our friend Hank, we all know him. He helped me with these questions. So I do want to say, hey, thank you, Hank, because that was struggling a little bit earlier with them. But I think that was what do we got? What do we got?
Murray State scored again. It was 5-3. Duke just homered. It is 5-4.
Oh, where are we at?
That game is close. Bottom of the 8th. 2 outs in the bottom of the 8th. That game is close.
There we go.
Was Murray what seed was Murray?
Last seed, right? Like,
were they a 4?
I don't remember if they. I don't remember the.
They a 3 or a 4. Well, they don't reseed. I was talking about in the regional.
Don't remember.
I'm not sure.
I don't have that off the top of my head.
I want to say 3, but I can't.
I was trying to find.
Don't trust that. That could be wrong.
Yeah. All right. So we've kind of jumped around the basis of what the MLB draft is and that. Now let's dive in a little bit deeper to more of the specifics, like we like to do a little bit here. And we got 2 more simple questions before we're going to get into the deeper stuff. So first one is, Liam Doyle is a big time like social media guy. Like he is very big on everyone's board on social media because he's just an animal. And that, there is a lot of talk that like around that start, not the ML baseball side actually, but like if he can stick as a starting pitcher, or if he might have to take the like Garrett Crochet route of like, hey, you're going to be a reliever for the first couple of years and then maybe jump back to starting depending on how that goes. Is that the feel that like you kind of get from MLB teams so far?
Doyle is a really fascinating guy for all of the reasons that you laid out. He is somebody that I think teams are going to have very divisive opinions on. I had a really good conversation with like some other evaluators on this very topic. Not a ton of teams. There were a couple team evaluators in there, but we were kind of talking about this actual discussion, right? Like the topic that the comparison was Jamie Arnold is a guy that is still very 2-pitch heavy. No one really drops a reliever risk comment on him, but they drop it on Doyle. Now, I think honestly, Doyle still has more reliever risk, but it is something where it's like, okay, so what's the difference here? At the end of the day, I think teams are going to have very differing opinions. I think team needs are going to affect this one. And here's where Doyle is fascinating, because I really think that teams should never draft for need. I am not here to say, oh, this team needs a catcher at college at the majors. They should draft this guy. Not in the first round. Do not do this. That being said, Liam Doyle is one of the rare guys where you could make an argument that if you feel really good about his long-term production and he's sitting there at you, and let's say you're the Blue Jays, you could take Doyle, feel really good about it. They love lefties, by the way. Take Doyle, let him run out there very briefly as a reliever to end this one particular season in which it could be frankly regime changing if you don't win. He could address a huge need while still long-term being a starter. And so that's really the early Garrett Crochet talk. That was the plan. And then they kept him as a reliever. But like originally, actually, let's go back further. This is the Chris Sale plan.
Yeah.
He came up immediately as a reliever. Then he went back to starting, and then he was up very soon. And he's 36 years old, still mowing people down. So like it can work. But I think the Chris Sale plan is at least within the realm of possibility if he's on board with it and you're on board with it, and like everyone's just happy.
All right, so I'm writing down Liam Doyle to the Angels at number 2 because they would just like to get them up there right away.
That is a very frequent association. The White Sox are another one. They love lefties. Honestly, there's certainly a few that make sense there. Yeah.
What? I mean, the Mariners and the Cardinals are like actually in position to take advantage of a high octane reliever right now, right? I mean, those are two teams in the wild card race in both divisions. Like they're picking 3 and 5. That makes a lot of sense. Now, like you said, right? They're not known for doing these types of things, but
right.
I mean, those are the two teams that would help the most. I would think.
They would probably get a lot of benefit, right? I think with the Cardinals, they've got a longer runway. They've picked their next president, and so they're probably in pretty good shape. This is a season probably that was a huge surprise. They would have been okay if they did a little selling. The Mariners, they just need somebody to hit that isn't Cal Raleigh.
My MVP.
I think that's probably the biggest thing. But yeah, I mean, there are clubs that could make sense. There are clubs that could just take Liam Doyle, scrap this plan, and just say, "No, you're pitching in the College World Series. You're good.
Yeah,
let's hit you up in 2026." That's honestly probably still the route. You definitely send him out as a starter, and you just have to have a plan for a third pitch. The fastball is disgusting. Frankly, it is insane. And you just hope that between that and the splitter, and then you can get one pitch, like slider, probably, maybe cutter, and then, just see how far that takes him.
Yeah, the tenacity he has on the mound, like the other day when the guy stepped out trying to like pause him and he just stayed locked in the entire time. And as soon as the guy stepped back in, he was like, all right, here's like 100 right past you. Like that, I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah, he could be a real monster. Yeah.
Oh, good, man.
No, I was gonna say I have a few questions. The first thing, just to add, and this is kind of back to that general stuff, but Doyle is an example. Are there any reservations of teams about taking guys who have transferred 3-4 times? Because obviously Doyle started at Coastal, he went to Oxford, and then he went to Tennessee. Now transferring from mid-major to a major conference team, that's one thing. You want to prove yourself against better competition, but transferring from Ole Miss to Tennessee is kind of in some ways that might show yellow flags to me. I mean, is that something that teams are kind of taking into account, that players are kind of just ditching the team for a very small upgrade in NIL money or feuding with coaches or whatever? Or is that something that they're just like, this guy's too talented not to take?
Well, yeah, I mean, probably when you're talking about a guy like Doyle, I'm sure it factors into homework. Like, is this guy going to be easy to work with? Like, why did he transfer? Right. Like that's where you dig into what's this guy like in the clubhouse? We're going to make a $6 million investment in them. Are they going to be poisoning the well kind of thing? And I'm not saying Doyle does that, but that's the kind of question that you're at least asking. I haven't heard it come up, but I mean, I'd be surprised if there isn't an opinion somewhere within scouting circles. I mean, sometimes these scouts are pretty old school, right? And like, I would be surprised if it hasn't come up. But I haven't heard it come up as a like, oh, you can't take this guy, or even not Doyle's case, but like a lower level guy, like, we're just not as interested because this is his fourth school. I think people are they see the NIL stuff, they see the transfer, they just see the options that frankly weren't there a few years ago. And they kind of think, this is the world. Yeah. But it is something that I'm sure they're doing their homework on.
Another one question quickly. Cade Anderson he's kind of interesting to me because this is a guy who we've talked a little bit about injury guys. He had Tommy John a couple years ago, and he's not fully maxed out still. And it's kind of like, but he's projected to be like a top 10 pick in this draft. And it's just interesting to me that somebody who, he's not really, he throws low 90s, it seems like, maybe touches a little bit higher than that sometimes, but it seems like there's a lot of projectability built into a guy who is more of a guy who's been injured before, and you're looking at a top 10 college pitcher pick. So I thought that was kind of an interesting guy. Do you have an opinion on Cade Anderson and whether you would take him or not?
Yeah, I mean, people really like Cade. They see a deep pitch mix, and he's also younger. I think he's barely 21.
Yeah.
And like that's going to affect, some clubs. I mean, he just has lower mileage on the arm. Now he has had an injury. And so obviously you gotta weigh that. The curveball's pretty good. He's a guy that, there was some chatter that like the Mariners really like him at 3.
Wow.
You could make a really good case for the Angels to say, the Angels aren't really known for premier development program. There's not a ton you need to do with Cade Anderson. You kind of just need to get out of his way, give him innings to build up. And so you can make a pretty good case like Cade could just go 2. And or he could slip a little bit further. I mean, he's a pretty consensus top 10 player in the class, at least top 15. Certainly if there's Cub fans watching, unless there's an injury that happens, I'd be just astonished if Cade Anderson is available at 17. And so I think with a guy like that, I mean, it's a deep pitch mix. He's young. He's going to pop on a bunch of the models. Yeah, like he's going to look pretty good.
Interesting. So here's my thing, and what I like about this, you've talked a lot about the pitchers, Doyle and Anderson. I think we talked about Arnold a little bit. Like, who's your favorite hitter in this draft? And I'll go either high school or college, and I'll say take Ethan Holiday off the board since we already talked about him. He probably goes 1. Like, who's your favorite like hitter? And then I'll splice that up with power and then approach, because I don't these days, like contact, it feels like all the college hitters are pretty good at contact. Maybe Jace Laviolette is the exception, but like approach, like who's your your OBP guy, the great eye is going to go 10-15% walk rate at the major league level like tomorrow, like those guys.
So the guy that honestly I think is just one of the best hitters in the entire class is Ike Irish. He started the year playing a little bit more catcher, probably going to end up in the outfield. Dude just hits. I mean, he hits exceedingly well. And you're buying the bat. You're not really buying the overall profile. But the bat is just so darn good that it's going to be worth it. He's another guy that there have been folks saying he could go 2. In the same kind of way, like the Angels, right? Like we don't need to do anything. It's kind of like Christian Moore. It's Zach Neto. It's just these guys that they're ready. And you just have to kind of see how it plays at the upper levels. Like Irish is that same kind of concept. It's just an unbelievably good overall profile and or hitting profile, I should say. The power is maybe a bit more of like above average though.
Yeah.
And if you're just talking raw power, I mean, it's probably Jace Laviolette. At least playable raw power. Brendan Summerhill is an incredible approach. He doesn't chase. He hits the ball decently hard. He makes good contact. He's exceedingly annoying up there to the point that, I mean, with Brendan Summerhill, I kind of get Sal Frelick vibes from him, who is now playing at the major league level for the Brewers. Just a guy that is an incredibly difficult at bat, your ideal table setter kind of a player, that overall profile. That's probably one of my favorite hitters in the class. I don't know if I was making the pick at like 15 or something, if I really would take him, just because the lack of power maybe scares me a bit, but I think he's really good. As far as the prep side, let me think about that one because, gosh, yeah, well, let's take Ethan Holiday off the board.
Yeah.
Eli Willits. People are really impressed with the hit tool with him. He is a prep shortstop, also in Oklahoma, ironically. Because Ethan Holiday is also in Oklahoma. I should have provided more context, not just because, talented player come from Oklahoma. But the hit tool is really good with him. And then Billy Carlson's kind of that same concept, another shortstop out of California.
So a couple of the guys, or one thing, let me make this a different question. First, give me a kind of an underrated prep guy that could go a little bit earlier than what most people think. Like a couple years ago, you gave us Niamala, right? Which a lot of people weren't talking about him at that point, and he ended up going a lot higher than what they really did think about. And another part of just talking about the prep thing that I would think is pretty interesting is Cruz Schoolcraft.
Yep.
There's some potential there with the bat, but then also on the mound. Like what is the feel around what his outlook is going to be like and how some teams view him potentially mound or first base? Like what's the profile, what most people expect him to be?
I've only heard mound long-term. That's just what I've heard. I'd be pretty surprised if that wasn't the plan for him. Like if he goes to college, I could see him doing both. But I would say if he ends up at the major league level or the pro side, I should say, very likely just the mound. Kind of similar to Noah Schultz, who is one of the prospects in the White Sox system. Big, giant lefties. The floor of the velocity is lower. The ceiling, it'll be at that big giant lefty that occasionally touches like 98 and you're like, oh my God, like we've got to like, let's raise the floor of that velocity.
Yeah.
When this guy fills out, he's going to be a monster. And we kind of see that with Noah Schultz. I think there's going to be too many teams that look at that and say, yes, like if you want us to go pro, we see it on the mound. That's probably where I would go with it. As far as like underrated prep, it's probably on the hitting side. There's a few guys that I can think of here. One that's not getting really talked about a ton. He's making his way into mocks. Like you can see his name. It's not like this hidden gem that I'm unearthing right now. But Daniel Pierce, he is a high school shortstop out of Georgia. Really love his stuff. I've dug in a little bit with some coaches down there in the college side. On the high school side, and people really believe in him. Like they just feel like he is going to be an all-star shortstop. They think he's going to stick. His biggest question has been leading into this year, just not showing a ton of juice, but he's very twitchy and looks really good defensively. And the hit tool looked really good. Well, now he is showing that juice. And like, that's what teams want to see. Now he's a right-handed hitter. So some teams maybe knock that a little bit. He's really good. And it's not just all the glove. Mm-hmm. So Daniel Pierce is a guy that probably doesn't get talked about a ton, maybe if you're not like really digging into these mocks, but he is definitely a guy that I would pay attention to. There's another arm that I want to mention with this Matthew Fisher, not Andrew Fisher, who is the first baseman out of Tennessee. But Matthew Fisher is a right-handed pitcher in Indiana. Everything just looks good. The whole profile looks really, really good. If you told me that he ended up in the first round, I wouldn't be shocked. Everything looks solid. He has the potential for a very deep pitch mix. I could certainly see a club try to buy him down to their second selection. I think he's committed to just Indiana. I shouldn't say just Indiana, but like, it's not like he's going to LSU or anything with massive pocketbooks where you're just like, you're not gonna get this guy. Yeah. I think if a team really wants to commit, I think that they can certainly get him if he's open to it. And Fisher just does really like everything quite well. But those would be two guys that just off the top of my head that are just really impressive. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give a quick shout out to a lefty. He is down in kind of in the South. I'm blanking on which state, but Talon Healy scouts that have watched Talon Healy, he's a Vandy commit. Just love the dude. Just absolutely love him. He's been through an unbelievable amount of adversity. He is a cancer survivor. He's had Tommy John, and he still goes out there and does amazing things. There's certainly some risk with the profile. This is not a guy that likely goes in the first round, but you will have scouts maybe literally pounding the table saying we have to bring this guy in.
Yeah.
And I just really want to give a shout out to Talon Healy because, gosh, if he ends up in an org that I follow, I would be really pumped to welcome that kind of person and obviously the player into the organization.
Yeah, he's from Mississippi, by the way.
Oh, Mississippi. I knew it was somewhere. I was pretty sure it wasn't Georgia, and it was somewhere down south. So
I want to shout out your contribution, at least on our podcast, but you've also done like really good work on, Northside Bound and then recently Just Baseball and a bunch of these other websites. But relating into our show, Damian mentioned it a little bit, is I feel like you have come on here and given us like the hits of the draft like every year. Like we talked about Nolan Schonnell 2 years ago, right? And he went 11 to the Angels. MLB teams were way higher on him. You were way ahead of us on that. Like, you talked about Namala. The guy
Namala's been great in the minors this year, by the way.
Yep. He's been awesome. Yep. Brian Waldschmidt last year, I remember. You talked about him a ton, right? He's gone to Arizona. He just keeps hitting. He looks like a really good prospect. He's going to come up and be one of those college hitters that, it took him a year and a half. And look, there he is, 10% walk rate, 20% strikeout rate, 20 homers. There it is. Like, it's just that this kind of discussion is so awesome. Like, and I always want to give you your guy here, right? We've talked about it's like, especially because you and I are Cubs fans. It's how we've, interacted before. And a lot of this has come from, hey, Greg, who do you think the Cubs are going to take? Who's your guy? If the Cubs are there at 17, they've got your guy on the board. Who's your guy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that preamble. That was really fun. The guy the year before wasn't with this podcast, but I wanted Zach Neto.
Yeah,
I was like, Zach Neto, please. And obviously,
he's really good.
Has done just fine. But Neto is crazy. So, I mean, it's nice to have some wins, is all I say. There's also some takes that I'll have out there that people, if you looked back on, you'd probably think they're a little silly too. But that's just the fun of it. That's the fun of it. So, my guys, I was asked this question today, and I just said what I'm hoping for at 17 is that there's Gage Wood, right-handed pitcher out of Arkansas, and Daniel Pierce, that shortstop that I was just talking about, high school shortstop, are sitting there at 17. And in the room, so to speak, I want which player development group is going to just be shaking things and trying to barricade the door to say, this is the guy that's going to be the frontline starting pitcher, or this is the guy that's going to be our all-star shortstop, push Dansby Swanson to second base in his last 2 years and be our guy. Those are my two guys, I think. Okay. If I had to pick one, there's such different demographics that I don't know that I could really pick one, but I think separately they are both going to succeed really, really well. And provided Gage Wood ends up in the right organization, and I'm praying that that's the Cubs and not the Brewers.
Oh no, you've done it now.
Nightmare if he gets to 20 and they pop him, or like the Dodgers or something like that. The guy entering the year that I really liked was Patrick Forbes, and he still looks like I think he can pitch his way to be a first rounder. But there's some more questions. Last year, my guy was Trey Savage too. And I think overall that looks really good. Obviously Cam Smith has done just fine for himself. Heck, he's doing it in the majors now.
Yeah.
But my two guys I think entering the College World Series are Gage Wood, and then on the high school side is Daniel Pierce.
Dang, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that. I'm gonna, it's one of those things where I'm gonna be looking out for those guys. Obviously, with Gage Wood's pitching in the College World Series, so that's a guy we're gonna want to watch out for. Him and Zach Root is the other one for Arkansas, right? That we want to take a look at. He'll be high in this draft. Excluding those guys, and I want to tie it to the College World Series, and then we'll go to Player of the Week. But who is your College World Series specific guy? Someone we haven't talked about, With you got Arkansas, you got Tennessee. Those are kind of the two big teams. Like LSU's probably got one too. Some we haven't talked about that we can still watch this week that we want to go out and like somebody out there wants to go out and scout. Who's somebody else that you're like, go watch this guy every time he comes to the plate this week?
Yeah, I mean it's Weiwei Aloy. Well, let me toss two names. It's Weiwei Aloy, who's the shortstop in Arkansas, and my gosh, he is just so much fun because it's good defense and it's power. And I don't know that the hit tool is gonna maybe be like plus or anything in the future, but if you can get it to average, honestly, the overall profile just really looks quite good. And that one is an excellent and fun pick to kind of watch out for. The other guy that I do want to toss out here is, gosh, I think I just blanked on it. Hold on, let me look at the teams here because I just had somebody right off the top of my head, and I just oh my gosh, yeah, sorry, Oregon State, Trent Caraway.
Okay,
Trent Caraway is a guy that he came into his draft class a couple years ago as a high school player, and he almost definitely, I don't want to speak out of turn here, he almost definitely turned down first round money, or at least got pretty close to it. He wanted to go to Corvallis. He's playing in Omaha. A couple months ago, it looked okay. It was doing all right. Dude has exploded since the NCAA regionals. He has 6 home runs in regionals and super regionals. I honestly stopped counting at 6. It's possible he hit another one last night, but I think it ended up at 6. Yeah. And yeah, thank you, Todd. Yeah, love Trent Caraway. If he has a monster College World Series, dude could hit himself into the first round. I was just doing the Cubs on Deck podcast. I was pinch hitting for Greg Huss, and a shout out to Greg Huss, by the way. If you don't follow him, you definitely should. Yep. And if you, so I was pinch hitting for him, and I was asked a question from a listener, basically, who could hit their way to the first round, kind of like Christian Moore did last year. And 2 guys I brought up, Charles Delavan, who I haven't talked about, but plays in Arkansas, has just been on fire as well. And then Trent Caraway. And these guys are mostly just bat. But the bat's been really killer recently. And like at some point, teams are going to take that, right? Like you may want to have a guy with a little bit sexier, like defensive profile at the top if you're drafting in the top 10. But if you're sitting there in the 20s, and this guy's like just gross on your model in a good way, like at some point you just kind of take him. So Trent Caraway would be a guy I'd watch. Weiwei Aloy, a guy I'd watch. I'm not going to miss one of their at-bats is what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. I do want to say that Murray State did finish it off.
All right. That's
so
Racers.
The 2008 Fresno State Bulldogs.
Let's go.
It's happening again.
Yeah. Real quick before we move on to the player of the day and wrap up and everything. I wanted to get your thoughts on my 2 guys for this one.
Yeah.
As a Dodger fan, it's kind of hard because they're 40 and 41 here, so it's kind of hard to look there. And one is a little bit homer, and that is Brady Ebel, because Dino Ebel, third base coach for the Dodgers already, he's been highly spoken about in general. But then the guy who is always my guy, I usually find a prep pitcher that I love. Last year was Cash Mayfield and Cam Kiminiti.
Cash.
Yeah, and I was so mad that they went Kellen Lindsey instead of Cash, and Cash went to the Padres.
Yes.
We won't talk about that. But this year, the guy that I've really liked and looked for is Jack Bauer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Ebel's really interesting because he's one of this like an absolutely stacked Corona roster. Yeah. It's like insane. Billy Carlson may go top 5 in the class. And I was getting a text from a scout who rolled into one of the tournaments down there. And he's like, I already know who's going to win because Corona has Billy Carlson hitting 5th in their lineup. And I think Ebel was hitting like 1st or 2nd or something like that. He's just really good. He hits from the left side. He's an LSU commit.
Yes.
And I think the biggest thing with him is the fact that like projectability looks really good. And he's a bit on the younger side, I believe. you just kind of think he's going to keep getting better and better. And so if you go back a few years ago, this is what the Dodgers used to take. That's the kind of guys they would take.
Yeah.
It's like it hasn't fully clicked, but you can give him some time to just kind of cook in the minors, and it's not a big deal. That's the kind of guy that the Dodgers could easily take. Would not surprise me, and I bet they'd look really smart doing it, to be honest. I remember reading this comp someplace, and I like it. I can't remember where, but it's somewhere out there. It's a good publication, I'm sure of it. And they comped him to Eric Bictoni.
It's just baseball.
I was gonna say that's your
publication. Okay.
What do you know?
Well,
Yeah.
That felt a little self-serving to say that, but I didn't write that. So I can say that if that's from Just Baseball, then it's from the fine work of Tyler. So Eric Bictoni was a guy that can drive the ball really, really well. And you're just wondering how an organization is maybe going to address like the hit tool and just make sure that it matches up against the higher pro teams. He would be kind of in that same mode. And he looks great for the Brewers last time I checked, Bictoni. So kind of the same idea with Evil. Totally a Dodgers pick, if I had to guess. Now, the other guy, really quick, some quick hits on Jack Bauer. Yes, he wears 24. I'm almost positive I've seen the numbers on this, and he was not, I think he wasn't alive when 24 was on. So if that just makes you feel terribly old,
right.
That really leans into it, but maybe his parents were huge fans. I don't know. Jack Bauer, insane velocity. Teams, from what I've heard, don't quite know how to feel about it. They just don't understand. Like, high school left-handers aren't supposed to throw 102.
Yeah.
And so you just don't know. And I'm not saying that it's like he's going to get Tommy John. Like, I hate people that do that. You don't know. People can just be physical freaks. But it's really hard. There's just no precedent. And sometimes teams don't know what to do if there's not a historical precedent. And so he will be very interesting to watch. He also was committed to Virginia. And now Virginia just lost their coach, and he's reopened his commitments. So that is a team that may have some SEC money sitting around. Oh boy, I could see them throwing things at him and just say, we have Liam Doyle at home. We do. Tennessee could literally do that exact thing. It'll be
Mississippi State.
Or Mississippi State, right? Yeah. And follow the same coach. That absolutely could be the play. I don't speak with any knowledge there, but yeah, it's actually a really good high school class out of Illinois. That's just not. I mean, I'm originally from the Illinois area, or I'm from Illinois, Chicagoland area, not Chicago. And I would have to say that we haven't always had really strong high school classes. But you know what? It's a great group, and they've put in a lot of work. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, you have given us a wealth of great information today, so we always appreciate that. And Todd wanted to give you another one.
Okay. He was 2 when it ended. All right. Well, see, that's good to know. Thank you.
There you go.
It doesn't make me feel any younger, though.
Yeah, it didn't really help. I mean, seeing the numbers is just startling. So thanks, Todd.
And like you mentioned, also, Ebel won't turn 18 until late July. So we mentioned he was young, but that's that. So always, this is an amazing episode. We could go on forever doing this, basically, but it's been great. Before we get to player of the day and that, do you have anything that you want to kind of shout out that you're working on, or just what people should be on the lookout for seeing from Greg?
In the next few weeks, I'm going to be debuting some deeper mocks. Something that I always do every single year is a full 20 round mock, factoring in to the best of like how I project guys, not like I'm operating with their asks from advisors, but just we factor in the bonus pool. So it's not just these are the best 20 players that I want to draft. It's really trying to make all the numbers fit. I do it for the Cubs, but you can kind of just look across the board at your team and look at like 8th round guy, 9th round guy, 17th round guy. it just has been a lot of fun. And so that's a labor of love, though. I know that that's about as niche as you could possibly get within this space, but it's my niche. And so I love it. I'll have a couple other things related to, I don't know if I'm going to debut this before the draft, but I should be covering a high school baseball tournament, a nation tournament that actually plays in Omaha at Charles Schwab, among other places, called the National High School Baseball Championship. And so I will be putting that out there. So if you get a little confused by all these guys that are not 2025 eligible, that's what's happening. But otherwise, yeah, I should just have some draft content. You can follow me on Just Baseball, as well as I also write for my own kind of Substack. It's free, but if you want to jump in there, it's called The Baseball Tribune, which I was absolutely shocked that no one had taken that name anywhere. But it's mine now. So if you want it, I'll take your checkbook later. And I dig into some MLB stuff, some Cubs stuff, some draft stuff, some prospect stuff, just a mix of whatever I'm kind of feeling.
Sweet
Good stuff, man.
Well, David, go ahead and take it away so we can do our player of the day.
It'll be player of the week. So Greg, you get to toss in player of the week. We'll go jump quick to the major league side. I've got Kerry Carpenter as our player of the week for last Monday, I think June 2nd. 3 home run day for Kerry Carpenter there against the White Sox. And then the next one will be Paul Skeens, which surprisingly is Paul Skeens' first player of the day win for us this year. He gets 8 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 8 strikeouts, and a loss against Houston, which that's been about Paul Skeens' entire season so far. After that, we had a tie between Merrill Kelly and Mackenzie Gore. Merrill Kelly won with 7 innings, 1 hit, 7 innings pitched against the Braves, 8 strikeouts.
It's not that impressive. It was the Braves.
That's the Braves. Tyler Soderstrom got it with a 2 home run, 6 RBI day against the Twins on June 5th. June 6th was Tarek Skubal, 7.2 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts against the Cubs. Shut him down. That's pretty solid. Bryce Elder picks up a player of the day. Matt, is your favorite one right there. Grab 8 innings pitched, 3 hits, 12 strikeouts against the Giants. 12 strikeouts from Bryce Elder. Matt, what happened there?
Okay, if you remember back last time we talked about the Braves and we had an injury, I said Bryce Elder was pitching a lot better this year. He made some adjustments that I liked. So I'm not going to say I called it, but I called it. Now, I also called that the Braves were still going to lose, and they did because they got walked off in the 9th inning, of course. But, hey, you know what? I called it. Bryce Elder is back. It is not a fluke of a year in 2023. He's going to be an all-star. It's just going to happen.
We need to take Spencer Strider out of Bryce Elder and put him back in Spencer Strider.
Bryce Elder has been a better pitcher this year than Spencer Strider.
He has.
Hence why I said we need to take Spencer Strider out of Bryce Elder and put him back in Spencer Strider.
And he's throwing almost as hard.
Yeah.
Say that too.
That's wild. We also yesterday's player of the day was going to be George Kirby for the 14 strikeout, 2 earned run performance against the Angels. Paul Skeens didn't get a single vote yesterday. I don't.
They won.
Pirates fans, we need you to show up for Paul Skeens. He has been in just about every single start is on the poll. He is available to be voted for every single time he goes out there to pitch, which is crazy because this is the first time I've ever been doing this. And there's only one guy that comes up every 5 starts. It's Paul Skeens. Every 5 starts.
Scooball's pretty close.
Scooball's just like every other start, but Skeens has been every start. It's crazy. So Greg, I'll give you first cut here on the player of the day, and we'll eventually vote. And what you got of those guys.
So player of the day or player of the week?
Player of the week.
Oh, okay. No,
we just use those days.
Those guys. Boy, that was a big day. I didn't think that was all today.
No.
No.
I'm gonna go Bryce Elder. That was an unbelievable performance. Not only is this a guy who, 8 shutout innings against like the Giants is really impressive. Racking up 12 Ks is just hard. I mean, this is a league that there's some swing and miss, but honestly, you have to be pretty darn impressive to get that many. And this isn't a giving up like Rockies team or something like that, down the stretch. I mean, this is a Giants team where every win matters.
Yeah.
And so I just, that Bryce Elder, I actually caught a little bit. It was just amazing work. And so that's my guy. I mean, that's my guy. Scuba was awesome to see. I will toss out there that I thought that the Cubs kind of got to him like a little bit, like as much as you can get to Scooble, who is just insane. He and Skeens are like neck and neck to the point that it's just must watch every single time. But I'm going to go Elder on that. I was so impressed.
Matt, I'm guessing you're concurring with Greg there.
Yeah, I do want to say that I'm going to pick Elder because, I mean, that was just super impressive and unexpected, unless you're me. But I will say this. I saw a stat, Tarek Scooble's last 11 starts, 95 strikeouts, 3 walks.
I love it.
I mean, this is starting to look like peak Jacob deGrom back in the 2018, like that level of pitcher we've got here, and hopefully he stays healthy. But he's just been out on another level this year from everyone else, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yep.
Damien, who you got? Sticking with Elder?
No, you know where I'm going. My vote doesn't really matter here, but I have stood on the table on this podcast and said George Kirby is my guy for years, ever since he was at Elon. He got 14 Ks. I don't care if it's against the Angels. He got 14 Ks. I'm standing on the George Kirby train. Not like my vote really matters. It seems like it's going to be Elder anyways, but I'm standing on the George Kirby train. You guys are going to have to pull me off.
Well, I'm going to stand on the Paul Skeens train. Damn it. He was in the poll twice this week. 2 weeks. But all his votes happened in one day. Unbelievable. But by picking Paul Skeens, I will therefore default the vote to Bryce Elder. Because I won't vote for Bryce Elder in this case, but I will vote for Paul Skeens in so doing. Bryce Elder is our player of the week for June 2nd to June 8th. Please vote for our polls. I put them up every day. I don't put them up on the weekends because the weekends are hard. I'm not by a computer. But Monday morning, there's going to be like 2 or 3 polls coming out. So just keep an eye on it. But we've had over 1,000 votes, 1,200 votes cast this season. A bunch of those are us, obviously, but like, thank you so much for voting on the poll. It seems like it's showing me a lot about what people value, what's happening in baseball every given day. It's been a really fun way to keep track of it. So I hope that you guys keep watching and keep voting on the polls.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic episode. Again, Greg, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to get you on after the draft to get some reactions and stuff from there. But everyone, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We're on the push to try and get to 500 subscribers by the end of the year. And if you enjoyed this contest, let us know, and we'll get Greg on to bring you guys more of it in the future. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys back here next week.